Joe Kent, right here. He's the guy that Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez beat out for congressional representative. Southern Washington, where I live. Yeah, this is him. He says this. Trump's pick for counterterrorism calls for arresting Blum leaders as terrorists. We need to treat Antifa and, BLT, without the T though, but with an M, like terrorist organizations, says Joe Kent. We need to use the tools of the federal government, the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, to go after them like organized criminals and terrorists. This is what he's saying. I don't like it any more than anybody else does, but this is what the fuck he's saying. And I just don't even know what to do with this sometimes. So let's think about this for a second, the people that he wants to go after. And think of it in a way that I'm going to try to get through this article without setting off any, super sensors that we have here. If I can find there we go. So I am having a hard time without my glasses, but I should be getting them within the next week or so. So that should be covered. Joe Kent, a former Green Beret, who is Donald Trump's pick to lead the National Counterterrorism Center. What a fucking pick. Completed 11 combat deployments during the War on Terror, Forever War. The combat left scars. In 2019, an ISIS suicide bomber killed his wife, a Navy cryptologist and linguist, in Syria. By the time he returned home, his worldview has shifted. Kent came to believe, as he wrote in a 2022 profile, that his early tours in Iraq gave him a special gift of clarity. He understood how quickly a society could come undone. Yeah, they know how quickly. After this, Kent went from apolitical to active. The BLM, and Antifa protests in Portland during the summer of 2022 triggered fears for him that the United States could similarly implode. Everything he felt was crumbling. He and his two young boys quickly... Wait a minute. That made him think that how fast the United States could crumble? I remember those. I was there at the protests in Portland, and I'm going to tell you something. The agitators for those protests had nothing to do with that movement. Nothing. There were people that just took advantage of all the chaos in the streets to go and break into businesses and loot them. It had nothing to do with that movement. Every time people use violence, it hurts the movements that exist there. You have to know that. People that protest, that believe in their causes, do not commit violence. They don't. It just delegitimizes their cause. At any rate, Kent is continuing to say, we need to treat those people like terrorist organizations. We need to use I can't even repeat that again. That is part of what makes putting Kent in charge of the National Counterterrorism so unsettling. He is a trained counterinsurgent who is now far more attuned to the threats from within than from overseas. Good point. The idea that America could quickly collapse, but if not for the vigilance of people like him, could serve to justify any number of abuses of power. It was the origin of the political awakening that led him to launch two unsuccessful runs for Congress in 2022 and 2024, defined by his turn toward hard right politics. That's why we didn't vote for you, Kent. If confirmed by the Senate, Kent could be a key player in the intelligence apparatus that helped push the United States into the wars he helped fight. The Counterterrorism Center he is set up to lead is itself a response to the 9/11 attacks that shaped so much of his life. As its leader, Kent would work closely with the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, to share information with the state and local law enforcement about potential terrorist threats. He is on track to report to former Republican Representative Tulsi Gabbard, another Iraq War veteran, who's Trump picked for the Director of National Intelligence. And we all see what success she's having, don't we? Under the law, the National Counterterrorism Center is not supposed to handle intelligence pertaining exclusively to domestic terrorism. But that provision may be less meaningful in an administration, in a Vladministration, that is so obviously willing to violate democratic norms and congressional intent. To an unusual extent, for an unapologetically MAGA figure, what even a liberal might make of Kent depends on what part of the interview they hear. When talking about Iraq and Afghanistan, he could be mistaken for Senator Bernie Sanders. Not only were those wars useless in his telling, they were corrupt conspiracies in which former Vice President Dick Cheney and his cronies at Halliburton enriched themselves with the blood of a volunteer army. True, that's true. He frames the loss of America's manufacturing base through a similar anti-elite lens. It's very, very troublesome, this piece in Mother Jones. Where Kent would lose a liberal or a centrist listener is when he describes returning home to his hometown in Portland, Oregon, following the death of his wife in 2019. Kent made clear in the same interview that he had come to see fellow citizens as akin to the insurgents he had once fought abroad. We thought our war would just be overseas and that we would all come home and finally relax a little, he had said, but that's just not the case. As I wrote in 2022, Kent is the candidate of our not quite forever war, bending back on itself. His campaign did not respond to interview requests, but he has laid out his worldview in hours-long interviews with fellow veterans and right-wing podcasters. The conversations make clear that his enemies are the generals he blames for the deaths of his family and friends, the elites waging hybrid warfare against middle-class Americans, and groups like Antifa and Blum that operate as organized crime syndicates and terrorist organizations. He positions himself as a new right class of politician. This is bullshit. Ken is not he's not a new right class of warrior, but unlike so many of the new right Republican leaders who skew rich and Ivy League, Kent is not a campus reactionary now out in the world. He is a soldier radicalized by senseless wars. And this is who Trump picks to lead the counterterrorism unit and he's calling for arresting domestic terrorists who he labels as democratic protesters. Let's get that fucking straight right now. And as somebody who lives in my district, I tell you, Joe Kent, go fuck yourself. You have been twisted by the wars that you fought in, twisted by the war in which got your first wife murdered. But the answer is not to turn on Americans. That is not how we do things. This is out of control, y'all. If he gets confirmed, scary shit's going to happen. Scarier than already is happening. This man is a danger, a clear and present danger.